Big time banger at flyweight. We have the return of Matheus Nicolau taking on my guy, Starboy, Manel Kape. And Matt, we were so excited for Manel Kape's UFC debut. And you talk about somebody fighting in a mirror. I mean, it was like fighting in a house of mirrors. Manel Kape just didn't engage. I mean, he fought Alexandre Pantoja his last time out. And I pumped Kape's tires. I pumped them so hard. And he came out and just didn't do a whole lot. So it was really kind of worrisome, especially in a fight like this against Matheus Nicolau, the type of guy that will really push a pace. And I'm not saying Matheus Nicolau is a fighter like Pantoja. He's very one-dimensional when you compare him to Pantoja. I mean, if you look at Matheus Nicolau, awesome takedown defense, very, very good striker. For Manel Kape, decent takedown defense, but he's primarily known as a great boxer. And the thing for me that I was a little bit worried about with Manel Kape, okay, he's trained out of AKA Thailand for a long time. He has really, really good footwork, really defensive fighter. Like, if you talk about strikers, you like Jourdain for the fact that he can go all defense and then all offense. Manel Kape's one of those guys. He can kind of stand there, play the defensive game, and when he needs to turn it on, he's got that crisp footwork. If you like, and this is a terrible example, but if you watch the Triller fights, now this was a card with Nate Robinson and one of the Paul brothers. If you watch Mike Tyson when he fought Roy Jones, this is a classic Mike Tyson thing where he'd do that kind of skip, and he just kind of skip on you. And if you want a really good Manel Kape fight, if you want to go back and watch the fight where he took on an aging Takeya Mitsugaki, he did exactly that, and he looked amazing. He will switch stances very well. He can work great from southpaw. He can work great from orthodox. He can mix in those sneaky little kicks. But the one kick that I don't like from Manel Kape is he does this kind of like, oh, I'm going to flip a soccer ball behind me, and I'll kick out his back leg to try and kick your front leg. It's the silliest thing ever. He did it once in the Pantoja fight. I stood there and shook my head. But overall, you look at the work rate of Kape in most of his fights, especially over in Rizin, the former champ over there, where he took on a decent level of competition. I mean, you look at the losses, Matt. Kyoji Horiguchi, Kai Asakura by split decision, Ulka Sasaki, former UFC vet, wins over Yusaku Nakamura, Seiichiro Ito, Takeya Mitsugaki, and again, Kai Asakura, where he finished him. Then he kind of held out for a UFC contract, had a fight booked against Rogerio Bontorin last summer. Bontorin, ankle injury, probably would have been a winnable fight for Manel. Then he fought Alessandro Pantoja in a fight that was rebooked a couple of times and gave us nothing. Matt, that's a lowdown on Manel Kape, and I think we did a crazy job of going in depth in his debut against Alessandro Pantoja. So I'll link that video down below if you want to have a more in-depth look at Manel Kape. But a great boxer, pretty good takedown defense, very, very fast hands, good defensively. You're taking on Matheus Nicolau that, listen, he lost to Dustin Ortiz. He went 3-1 in the UFC, with the loss being the last fight. He got knocked out by Dustin Ortiz. Crazy head kick.
Not a good sign.
But the UFC decided to cut Matheus Nicolau. They cut him in the same cuts as, who was it, Hector Sandoval and Brandon Moreno. Everybody was surprised at the time. Nicolau takes some time away, wins a couple fights. Now he's coming back into the UFC. Now, wins against competition that you might know and love. That's kind of the thing. Alain Gabriel over with Future FC, finished him, and he beat Felipe Efrain over with Brave CF. Pretty good wins. He was originally supposed to be taking on Tagir Ulanbekov in this fight. Kape coming in on short notice. He stayed in Vegas since his last fight, kind of fight ready, if you will, training with the guys that have AKA in the States, the Makhachev, the Javier Mendez, and Habib. So I'm really interested in this fight. What can you tell me about Matheus Nicolau, a guy that's been away for a little bit of time and served a tiny little USADA suspension before the fight, well, really before the fight against Elise Smolka?
So, Matheus Nicolau is a really, really fun fighter to watch. He does have a style kind of similar to a Santiago Ponzinibbio, where he's a really wide orthodox striker, really likes using his back leg, and he's got great calf kicks too. And the thing I like about Nicolau is he's not afraid to switch stances, but he is a fighter who suffers a lot defensively when he does switch stances. Kevin Lee's always the fighter who I think of when this comes up, because Kevin Lee, he's a great orthodox striker. He should probably just stand orthodox, but he isn't that kind of new school mentality of, oh, I've got to switch stances. But when he is in his southpaw stance, you can tell he's a much more hittable fighter. Nicolau does kind of share that similarity with him, where he is a little bit more hittable out of his southpaw stance, although I will admit he doesn't show it as much as a guy like Kevin Lee does. But it is a nice look to give his opponents, because he's not a guy who's very kick heavy, and normally when you see guys switch stances, especially when they go southpaw heavy, they like using that back left power leg to try to target out the liver. But for Nicolau, it's more just to get his punches in and out of range. It's to turn his jab into his power hand, and when he's throwing a combination, he is really good. good at going to the body and to the head. But again, for Nicolau, there's so many defensive lapses that he has in his game. He's a very hittable fighter, and that's what makes this fight really fun. Offensively, Matheus Nicolau is an absolute handful to deal with. There's a lot of artillery coming your way when you're fighting a guy like Nicolau. But for Kape, when he fought Pantoja, here's the thing. I think Pantoja is one of the elite in the division. I really do. And I think all he needs is 1, maybe 2 more wins. We will see that Figueiredo rematch in the future. And you say Kape's your boy. I think you're too hard on your boy for losing to one of the best fighters in the division because he looked hesitant against Pantoja. But I think Pantoja is just that kind of a fighter. You can't really let your hands go against him because there is the threat of a takedown because he is so good on the ground. And you really don't want to just let your hands fly because you know how much of a power puncher he is. So I think this is a great rebound fight for Kape because it allows him to face another top-tier striker, but it gets rid of some of those variables that Pantoja brought into the cage. He isn't going to have to worry about the grand game as much with Nicolau. He isn't going to have to worry about the wrestling as much, and I do think that will allow Kape to really show his striking in this fight.
And I mean, I talked about the fact that Manel Kape, he has decent kicks, this and that. He didn't throw a ton of them, but really didn't throw a ton of anything in the fight against Pantoja. And the other thing, too, he was at least kind of mixing in some of the takedowns. Didn't do a lot with them, but he was at least kind of threatening them, which, again, bit of a head-scratcher when you're taking on Alessandro Pantoja. Against Matheus Nicolau, you know, we talked about it. The guy has really, really good takedown defense in the UFC, and that's something that you're not going to have to worry about. 100% takedown defense in 4 fights. He had a win over the former title challenger, John Moraga, a guy that you don't hear enough about these days. If I look at the odds for this one, I'm not overly surprised. Again, you had a fighter in Matheus Nicolau that was originally supposed to be taking on Tagir Ulanbekov. Honestly, and I'm not even joking, I would have picked Nicolau to beat Tagir Ulanbekov. Yeah. I didn't think Ulanbekov looked very good at all in his debut against maybe lesser competition. I mean, compared to Manel Kape when he took on Pantoja. So that's just me. I look at this one, the odds, Matt. Yeah, I mean, Kape open to -115, now -149. For Matheus Nicolau, open to -115, now a +123 or thereabouts. And if we have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt, might be a bit of a surprise. 863 of them, 79% Kape, 67% by knockout. I'm taking Manel Kape to win by decision. But Matheus Nicolau is a great opportunity in this one.
Matheus Nicolau is one of the few power threats in this division where if he catches you with the right shot, you're going to go down. I don't care who you are. Look at the Louis Smolka fight. He drops him 3 times. And
in the first round.
And he cracks him clean throughout that fight. And he does have pretty good cardio, too. He's not just a power puncher who's going to blow himself out in that first round going for the finish. He can keep that power late into the fight. So I do think there's an opportunity for Nicolau to win this fight, but I do like the speed of Kape. This is my issue. People remember him for that Kaya Sakura KO. That's not the fighter you're going to get in the UFC every single time out. That is him at his absolute best. You have to remember, he also lost to Ulka Sasaki. Ulka Sasaki was a flyweight who got cut before it was cool to cut flyweights. So there's quite a few question marks out there for Kape, but I do think getting a win over Nicolau is going to prove a lot.
No wrestling shoes. Maybe it means something in the UFC. Maybe a cage is different than a ring. Just ask Fedor. Matt, we're both going with... Yikes. My guy, Manel Kape, to get the win. And let's see what happens in this one. Let us know down below in the comments section who you're going with. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Our main event's great. Our co-main event's great. It's a really interesting card. Let's keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.